Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. We always love getting your suggestions, and you guys really steered us towards something pretty fundamental this time.
Yeah, for sure.
We're diving into ability scores in D&D 5th edition.
The heart of the game, right?
Yeah, you sent us some choice excerpts from the basic rules over on D&D Beyond, so.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, and I think our mission here is to kind of break down these fundamental building blocks and see how they work.
Absolutely. And it's not just about what makes your character strong or, a brilliant spellcaster. It's really interesting to look at how the game uses these scores to define challenges and how a character can grow.
Yeah, it's like this hidden structure that makes everything tick.
Exactly. And it all starts with these 6 core abilities: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma.
The famous 6, every creature in the game has these scores. It's not just for adventurers.
It's literally everything from the lowliest goblin to a ancient dragon. They all operate on this framework.
Yeah, and it's really neat how those scores define not only what you're good at, but also like what you're not so good at. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Where your weaknesses lie.
That's where the real flavor comes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone might be super strong but really clumsy if their dexterity is low, or, a brilliant wizard might forget to eat lunch and pass out because their constitution is terrible.
It's all about that balance, right?
Exactly. It's what makes characters feel distinct and real.
So we've got the 6. Let's just quickly run through them. So strength, that's our muscle and might. Dexterity for speed and agility, and then constitution, which I always think of as like your inner toughness or like hardiness, how much you can take.
Your resilience.
Yeah, then we move to the more mental side with intelligence for reasoning and knowledge.
Your book smarts.
Yeah, exactly. Then wisdom, which is more about perception and insight, like seeing the world clearly.
Yeah, being aware.
And then finally, charisma, which is all about that force of personality, how you influence others.
Your presence. Yeah.
Right. It's like a really neat package. It covers all the bases, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's the core of those 3 main roles we talked about before. Ability checks, saving throws, and attack rolls. They all flow from these 6 scores.
Right. So they're not just there for flavor. They really are the engine of the game.
Absolutely. The core mechanics.
Now, the rules talk about an ability score and a modifier. What's the difference there?
So the score is like the raw potential, like a measure of how much natural aptitude a creature has in that area.
Okay.
And the modifier is how that raw potential translates into like actual bonuses in the game. It's the number you add to your D20 roll.
So the score is the potential and the modifier is what you actually use.
Exactly. And the basic rules actually have this table that shows you the relationship between the two.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It goes all the way from a score of 1 with a -5 modifier.
Oof. That's rough.
Yeah, not great, up to a score of 30 with a +10 modifier.
Now we're talking.
So that's quite a range, right?
It is, and it highlights the kind of scale the game works. Score of 10 or 11.
Yes.
That's like your average person.
Yeah.
But adventurers, they tend to start with scores of 14, 15, maybe even higher.
Yeah, a bit above average.
And while a typical person might top out around 18, an adventurer can reach 20.
Oh, wow.
And legendary creatures or, divine beings, they can go even higher.
That's a huge difference.
It is. It really shows you the range of possibilities.
And the modifier really starts to climb as the score gets higher, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a linear progression at all, like going from a score of 1 to a 12 or 13, which is just slightly above average. That jumps you from a -5 to a +1.
Big improvement.
Huge. And then getting to that like top tier of 18 or 19 gives you a +4 modifier.
Nice.
And hitting that maximum 30, that gives you a whopping +10 to your rolls.
So even small increases in the score can make a real difference.
Absolutely. Especially at those higher levels, it emphasizes how much more effective a creature becomes with even a slight edge.
Now, things aren't always straightforward, right? Sometimes you've got advantage or disadvantage.
Oh, yeah, the dice gets a little more interesting there.
Yeah, it sounds like it literally brings in an extra die, right?
That's right. So advantage and disadvantage, they're really elegant ways. The game represents like circumstances that either help or hinder your actions.
Okay.
So when you have advantage, maybe because you're getting help from a spell or you've got a good tactical position, you get to roll 2 20-sided dice and take the higher result.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it boosts your chances of success. And then if you have disadvantage, maybe you're blinded or trying to do something in really difficult terrain, you still roll 2 d20s, but this time you take the lower result.
So it swings both ways.
It does, and it's a really neat way of modeling the situation without having to like constantly calculate all these little modifiers.
It streamlines the process.
Yeah, exactly. And there's another neat thing. Even if you have multiple sources of advantage, you still only roll one extra die.
Oh, interesting.
Same with disadvantage. It doesn't keep stacking. And if you ever end up in a situation where you have both advantage and disadvantage,
Oh, wow.
maybe a spell is helping you, but you're also like standing in a puddle of oil.
Yeah, makes sense.
They cancel each other out, and you just roll a single d20.
So it keeps things from going completely off the rails.
Exactly. It keeps the probabilities within a reasonable range.
Now, there's this other bonus that we see a lot. It's called the proficiency bonus. How does that work?
So a proficiency bonus that represents a character's or monster's, training and experience, it's basically a reflection of their expertise in a particular area.
Okay.
For players, this bonus is tied directly to their level. So as you level up, your proficiency bonus goes up.
Makes sense.
For monsters, it's a set value. You can find it in their stat block.
Okay.
Now, this bonus gets added to any ability check, saving throw, or attack roll where the character or monster is proficient.
Okay, so it's like a reward for specializing.
Exactly. It's like saying you've put in the time and effort to be really good at this thing.
Yeah. So if, like, my sneaky rogue is proficient in the stealth skill, they'd add their proficiency bonus to their dexterity check when they're trying to, sneak past a guard.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
Okay.
And just like with advantage and disadvantage, you only add your proficiency bonus once, even if multiple things might suggest you could add it again.
Oh, interesting.
There are some special abilities out there, like a rogue's expertise feature, that can multiply your proficiency bonus for certain skills, but the key thing is you only get to apply it if you're proficient in the first place.
No proficiency, no bonus.
Exactly, that's the rule.
All right, so we've got our base score, the modifier, the possibility of rolling 2 dice with advantage or disadvantage, and then the proficiency bonus on top of that if we're skilled in that area. So now, how does all of this come together when my character actually wants to do something in the game?
That's where ability checks come in.
Right, the moment of truth.
Yeah, an ability check is basically the core mechanic the game uses to determine whether you succeed or fail at something that isn't an attack, and where the outcome isn't automatically guaranteed.
Okay, so it's for those actions where there's some uncertainty.
Exactly. And it's the Dungeon Master's job to decide which of the 6 abilities is most relevant to the action, and then set a difficulty class, or DC.
Ah, the infamous DC.
Right, the DC is basically the target number you need to meet or exceed to succeed.
And those can range quite a bit, right?
Oh yeah, the rules give us a nice range of typical DCs, starting from a very easy 5 all the way up to nearly impossible 30.
So, like, opening an unlocked door might be a DC 10 dexterity check, while kicking down a reinforced steel door might be like a DC 25 strength check.
Exactly. It gives you a real sense of the scale of challenges.
Right. So as a player, I roll my D20, add the relevant ability modifier, and if I'm proficient in a related skill, I add my proficiency bonus as well.
That's the formula. And if the total meets or beats the DC, you succeed. And if not, well, then the DM gets to describe what happens. Usually it's a pretty clear-cut yes or no. But sometimes a failure might mean you make some progress, but with a complication or a success could lead to an unexpected benefit.
It all depends on the situation.
It does, and the DM's creativity.
What about situations where it's not just one person against a set DC, but like 2 characters or creatures going head-to-head? I think the rules call those contests.
That's right. A contest is a specific type of ability check where 2 individuals are directly opposing each other.
Okay.
So think of it like an arm wrestling match that would be a strength contest, or maybe 2 characters are trying to outsmart each other in a riddle competition that might be an intelligence contest, maybe involving insight or deception skills.
So it's a direct face-off.
Exactly. And in a contest, both participants make an ability check using the relevant ability. They add their modifiers and any bonuses, and instead of comparing the total to a DC, they compare it to each other.
Whoever has the higher total wins.
Exactly. It's a straight roll-off.
Now what happens if they tie?
If they tie, neither participant manages to overcome the other. So the situation remains as it was before the contest began.
Okay.
It's a stalemate. So if 2 characters are trying to grab the same magical amulet and they tie on their dexterity checks, neither one gets it, at least not on that attempt.
Got it. So we've talked about skills a little bit, but it seems like they're more like focused applications of those broader ability scores.
Yeah, think of skills as representing specific areas of training or natural talent that fall under one of the 6 main abilities.
Okay.
With Constitution being the exception there, it's more about your internal fortitude than anything you actively do.
Makes sense.
Each ability has a list of associated skills. So, for example, dexterity covers things like acrobatics for balance, and agility, sleight of hand for like picking pockets and palming
Right.
objects.
Right, sneaky stuff.
Exactly. And stealth for moving unseen.
So being proficient in a skill means you've had focus training or just a knack for that kind of task.
Yeah, it means you're going to be significantly better at any ability check involving that skill.
So if I'm making a dexterity check to sneak past a guard, and my character is proficient in stealth, I add my proficiency bonus to the dexterity roll.
That's exactly how it works.
Cool.
And the DM might ask you to make a specific skill check. Like they might say, make a wisdom perception check to see if you notice anything unusual. Or, as a player, you might argue that your proficiency in a certain skill should apply to a general ability check that you're making.
Right, right.
Either way, that proficiency bonus can make a real difference in those crucial moments.
It's good to be skilled.
It is, and it's worth noting that there's also a bit of flexibility built into the rules. A DM can allow a skill to be used with a different ability score if it makes sense in the situation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so for example, maybe you have a barbarian who's not very charismatic, but they're incredibly strong and imposing.
Right.
The DM might allow them to use strength intimidation instead of charisma to try and scare someone.
Makes sense. It's using your strengths.
Exactly. It's about adapting to the situation.
So sometimes your character's not actively trying to do something, but they might still notice something or be aware of their surroundings. That's where passive checks come in, right?
Right. Passive checks represent those situations where you're not actively rolling dice, but your character's abilities and training might still allow them to perceive something or just achieve like a basic outcome.
Okay.
To calculate a passive check, you take 10 and add all the modifiers that would normally apply to an active check. So that includes the ability modifier and the proficiency bonus, if it would apply.
Okay.
If the character has like a permanent advantage on such checks, maybe from a specific trait, you add 5 to the total. And if they have disadvantage, you subtract 5.
So you end up with a score that the DM can use to compare against different DCs.
Exactly. It's like a baseline for how aware your character is without them actively trying.
So let's say my level 1 character has a wisdom of 14. That's a +2 modifier. And they're proficient in perception, which gives them another +2 bonus. Their passive wisdom perception would be 14, right?
Yeah, you got a 10 plus 2 plus 2 equals 14.
Which means the DM would tell me if there's anything with a DC of 14 or lower that my character would just passively notice.
Exactly. It's like they're always on the lookout in the back of their mind.
Passive perception, that's probably the one we see the most often, right?
Yeah, it's super common, especially for detecting hidden enemies or like secret doors or traps.
Right, those classic D&D situations.
Yeah, the rules for hiding and exploration, they often rely on these passive scores to determine what your character picks up on without needing to actively search or roll dice.
Okay, makes sense. Now, adventuring is rarely a solo activity. How do the rules handle characters working together to overcome a challenge?
There are a few ways characters can help each other out. One common way is the help action.
Okay.
You can use that in combat. Or for certain non-combat ability checks, basically one character can give another advantage on their next ability check, as long as the helper can reasonably contribute to the task.
So like one character could be holding a ladder steady while the other one climbs up?
Exactly, that's a good example. There are some limitations, though. You can't help with something that you yourself couldn't do.
Right, you can't lend expertise you don't have.
Exactly, if you have no idea how to pick a lock, you can't really help someone else pick a lock.
Yeah, fair enough. What about those situations where the whole group needs to succeed at something together, like navigating a dangerous area?
That's where group checks come in.
Okay.
In a group check, the DM asks everyone in the party to make a specific ability check. And if at least half the group succeeds, the whole group succeeds.
Oh, interesting.
If less than half succeed, the group fails. It's often used for situations where the success of the whole endeavor depends on everyone working together.
Like if you're trying to sneak through a crowded marketplace.
Exactly. Or maybe the party's lost in a forest and they're all making wisdom survival checks to try and find their way out.
Okay.
If enough people know what they're doing, the group succeeds. If not, they might all get lost.
Makes sense. Safety in numbers. All right, so we've covered the general mechanics that apply to all the abilities now. Let's dive into each of those 6. Starting with strength. It's all about brawn, but what does that mean in terms of actual gameplay?
So strength is all about your raw physical power, being able to exert force. So strength checks are going to come up when you're trying to lift heavy objects, break down doors, push a boulder out of the way, things like that.
Right, brute force.
Exactly. And the athletic skill, which covers stuff like climbing, jumping long distances, swimming against strong currents, that's all tied to strength.
Okay.
You might also make strength checks to resist being, like, shoved or grappled or to try and bend iron bars.
Classic D&D stuff.
Yeah. And, of course, strength is fundamental for most melee combat. You add your strength modifier to both the attack roll and the damage roll when you're hitting things with swords and axes and maces.
So the stronger you are, the harder you hit.
Exactly. And strength also determines your carrying capacity, how much weight you can carry without being encumbered.
Okay, so that's important to keep in mind if you're a hoarder.
It is. And a creature size plays a role in carrying capacity as well. Like, obviously, a huge giant can carry a lot more than a tiny gnome.
Makes sense.
There's actually an optional rule for encumbrance, where you track the exact weight of all your gear, and if you're carrying too much, you get penalties to your movement and actions.
Oh, wow, so it can really matter.
It can if you're playing with that rule.
Okay, let's move on to dexterity. This one's all about being quick and coordinated, right?
Exactly. It's all about agility, reflexes, balance, all that good stuff.
Mm.
So dexterity checks are common for anything that requires you to move gracefully, avoid danger, keep your balance on like a narrow ledge.
Like a tightrope walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The skills associated with dexterity are acrobatics for those acrobatic feats, sleight of hand for picking pockets, palming objects, being sneaky with your hands, and stealth for moving silently and unseen.
Okay.
You might also make dexterity checks to operate delicate mechanisms, disarm traps, or even play a musical instrument with finesse.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and dexterity is also really important in combat. It contributes to your attack and damage rolls with ranged weapons like bows and crossbows,
Okay.
and also with melee weapons that have the finesse property.
Ah, so it's not just about ranged combat.
Nope, it's versatile.
Mm-hmm.
And dexterity also determines your armor class, which is how hard you are to hit,
Right.
and your initiative score, which determines how quickly you act in combat.
That's crucial.
It is. And the rules for hiding, they're heavily tied to dexterity stealth checks, which are then contested by the wisdom perception of anyone who might be trying to spot you.
So it's a cat and mouse game.
Exactly. Things like dim light or cover can give you advantage on your stealth checks, while being in plain sight or making noise can give you disadvantage.
And someone actively searching for you, they can use their wisdom perception to try and beat your passive stealth score.
Right, even if they're not specifically looking in your direction.
Okay, now on to Constitution you mentioned earlier. It doesn't have any skills tied to it, so what's its main role?
So Constitution is all about your overall health, your stamina, your resilience. It's like your vital force.
Okay.
You don't usually make active Constitution checks that often, but they do come up in situations like holding your breath for a really long time.
Right.
Resisting extreme temperatures, going without food or sleep for extended periods.
So it's about endurance.
It is. It's about how much your body can take. Now, the most significant impact of Constitution is on your character's survivability.
Ah, so this is where hit points come in.
Exactly. Your Constitution modifier is added to each hit die you roll when you level up,
Okay.
which means a higher Constitution directly translates to more hit points. And if your Constitution score changes permanently for whatever reason, it'll retroactively adjust your maximum hit points as well.
So a higher Constitution means you're tougher and can take more damage.
Absolutely. It's the foundation of your character's ability to withstand all the nasty things that can happen to you in an adventure.
All right, let's get into the mental abilities, starting with intelligence. It's not just about knowing a bunch of trivia, right?
No. Intelligence is much more than that. It's about your mental acuity, your reasoning ability, your memory, how quickly you can learn and process information.
Okay.
So intelligence checks come into play when you need to recall a specific piece of information, analyze a situation, logically solve a puzzle, understand a complicated theory.
So it's about using your brain.
It is.
Yeah.
And the skills linked to intelligence are Arcana for knowledge about magic history, for remembering past events investigation, for piecing together clues,
Right.
nature for understanding the natural world, and religion for knowledge about deities and religious practices.
A lot of knowledge skills there.
Yeah, you might also make intelligence checks to decipher codes, appraise the value of items, create convincing forgeries, things like that.
Right, so it's not just about book learning, it's about applying that knowledge.
That's the key. And for wizards, intelligence is also their spellcasting ability, so it determines how powerful their spells are and how hard they are for others to resist.
Okay. Wisdom feels like it overlaps with intelligence a little, but focuses more on like intuition and awareness.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Wisdom is about being in tune with the world around you, being perceptive, understanding people's motivations, having that gut feeling that tells you when something's right or wrong.
Okay.
Wisdom checks often involve reading someone's body language to see if they're lying or if they have ulterior motives.
Using insight.
Exactly. Or noticing a hidden detail in the environment, or understanding animal behavior.
So it's about those subtle cues.
Yeah, and the skills associated with wisdom are animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, and survival.
So perception, that's about noticing things, right?
It is. It's about your senses, sight, hearing, smell. It's about being aware of your surroundings. And when you're specifically trying to spot something hidden, the DM might ask you to describe where you're looking.
To make it more realistic.
Exactly. You can't just see everything at once. And wisdom is also the primary spellcasting ability for clerics, druids, and rangers.
So a wise cleric can really pack a punch. All right, finally we have charisma. This one's often misunderstood. I think people think it's just about being attractive, but it's clearly more than that.
Oh, yeah, much more. Charisma is about how you interact with others,
Mm-hmm.
how you influence them. It's your confidence, your eloquence, your force of personality, even your ability to deceive.
Okay, so it's about social skills.
It is. Charisma checks come up when you're trying to persuade someone to do something, intimidate them with threats, deceive them with a lie, or entertain a crowd.
Right, all those classic social interactions.
Exactly. And the charisma skills are deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion.
Quite a range.
It is. You might also make charisma checks to find someone who can give you information or to blend into a social gathering without attracting attention.
To be the life of the party or to fly under the radar.
Exactly. And charisma is also the spellcasting ability for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks.
So a charismatic spellcaster can be pretty formidable.
Absolutely. They can use their charm to enhance their magic.
We've talked about the 6 abilities and all the different ways they're used, but there's one last mechanic we haven't covered in detail saving throws.
Oh yeah, saves, these are your characters, or a monster's attempt to resist a harmful effect.
Okay.
And that could be anything from a dragon's fiery breath to a nasty spell, a poisonous gas cloud, or even a disease.
So it's about resisting danger.
Exactly. And unlike ability checks, you don't usually decide to make a saving throw. It's triggered by something external.
Something bad happening to you.
Right. And when that happens, the rules will tell you which ability score to use for the saving throw.
Okay.
So, for example, dodging a fireball might require a dexterity saving throw, while resisting a mind control spell might call for a wisdom saving throw.
Makes sense. You use the ability that's most relevant to the threat.
Exactly. And to make a save, you roll your d20, add the modifier for that ability, and just like with ability checks, saving throws can have advantage, disadvantage, and other modifiers.
And sometimes your character might be particularly good at resisting certain types of threats.
That's right. As you level up in your class, you gain proficiency in at least 2 saving throws.
Okay.
So a fighter might be proficient in strength and constitution saves, reflecting their toughness and resilience.
And if you're proficient, you add your proficiency bonus to the roll.
Exactly, which makes a big difference in your chances of success. And monsters have saving throw proficiencies too. You can find them in their stat block.
Okay.
Now, the difficulty class for a saving through the DC, that's determined by whatever's causing the effect.
So for a spell, it would depend on the caster's spellcasting ability.
Exactly, and the outcome of a successful or failed saving throw that really depends on the specific effect you're trying to resist.
Okay.
You might completely avoid the effect. You might take reduced damage, or you might suffer the full consequences.
So saving throws are those moments where your character's strengths really come into play to protect them?
Yeah, they represent your ability to withstand danger, and they complement ability checks, which are more about how you interact with the world around you.
We've gone deep, haven't we? From the basic definitions of ability scores all the way to how they're used in checks, save skills, everything.
We've covered a lot of ground.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is.
It is. What's really neat is how these seemingly simple rules create such a dynamic system. Understanding these core concepts gives you a real appreciation for how D&D is designed and how character potential is linked to the challenges they face.
It's like this elegant system.
It is, and there are so many subtle touches. For example, the fact that there are no skills directly tied to Constitution emphasizes the internal nature of that ability.
Right, it's about your inherent toughness.
Exactly. And the rule that advantage and disadvantage don't stack, that's a clever way to prevent the probabilities from swinging too wildly.
It keeps things unpredictable.
It does. Even when the circumstances are heavily in your favor or against you, there's always a chance for the unexpected.
That's what makes it exciting.
It is.
So for our listeners, as you think about those 6 core abilities, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and how they work together, here's something to ponder. How might you use this framework to analyze strengths and weaknesses in the real world?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You could look at different professions or roles and see how they prioritize different abilities, or maybe think about how those abilities play out in personal relationships or even international diplomacy.
It's a whole new way of looking at things.
It is, and if anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to delve deeper into the basic rules. Maybe check out some online discussions and see how these concepts play out in actual games.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into ability scores.
It was fun.
I'll see you next time.
See